please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin our meeting, everyone here has probably heard of the incident that happened at North this afternoon, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Dean in a second for a more detailed explanation of what occurred. But as a parent of a student at North, I was reminded again of the precision with which our administration, both at North and our overall administration, handled the situation, and I was pleased with what I saw. And Dr. Lee, who also has a daughter at North, I think would echo those comments.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, Dr. Dean?
One of the biggest challenge, the first challenge all of us have as educators and as parents is keeping kids safe. That is always everybody's first concern. And today as a superintendent, I had one of those moments that no superintendent wants. I was actually standing with Dr. Bishop and Dr. Hartley, and I got a phone call from North administration that we had been placed in a lockdown by the police. And by we, I mean at Grosse Pointe North, because Morningside administration is part of that building. So that's why I'm going to use that pronoun of we. So no one wants that phone call. The fortunate piece of this is we have extensive protocols and training in place. We, in fact, have done training earlier this year, lockdown training, armed assailant training with all of our staff members this past August. Unfortunately, we had to enact some of the lockdown procedures today. We went into lockdown. We were in lockdown for about 35 minutes. I can't speak highly enough about the response from the Grosse Pointe Shores and Grosse Pointe Woods public safety departments. They were there in force. They had received a tip of a possible armed assailant at North High School. They conducted a search. Fortunately, there was no armed assailant. It ended up being a mistake a student made, and we're not going to go any further down that path, but we are working on that through the student code of conduct, and the police are working through that from a potential police matter situation. So fortunately, there was no firearm at this school. The students were never in danger. However, we were in lockdown, and I'm looking over here because I see a bunch of North students, and they're like nodding their head like that thing happened today. And we were in lockdown for about 35 minutes, and then the police gave us the all clear, and we were able to release students to their families, release students to go home, and all of our kids are safe. It is an important thing. It's something that all of us wish had not happened, and all of us wish we didn't have to go through that piece. Like, my blood pressure's still up, I think. However, our staff, all 850 of our staff members, have gone through training. The vast majority of our safety practices worked, and they worked well. We had debriefs after school today with administration and staff. We're going to have more debriefs before school tomorrow and after school tomorrow to figure out what can we do better. Anytime you have a big thing happen, you're always trying to figure out what we can do better, because there's always something. But I'm really proud of the support we received from our police and the actions our North administration and our North staff took to keep kids safe. So once again, there was no firearm at North. Everyone was safe the whole time, but we did have a lockdown today for about 35 minutes, starting around 12:40 or so and ending around 1:05. And we ended up releasing students at 1:45 for the day. So I did want to share that. We've shared more detail than that in writing to all North parents, and then we put that out on our social media feed for the district, so everyone in the district can get that information. I don't know what questions board members might have. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but obviously there's only certain questions I can't answer, and we can all understand what that would look like.
I just have a comment from a parent standpoint. I think our kids are really worried about shootings and whatnot in high schools. And I think it might be good to address those feelings in the days ahead.
One of the things we're doing, Dr. Lee, is we're meeting with the faculty of North tomorrow morning, and we're going to give them some language that they can use with kids if kids have questions. Okay? We are going to have a PA announcement at the beginning of the day tomorrow. Okay? We'll share that PA announcement with families after we've sent it out. Do you know what I'm saying? Just kind of a brief summary of what happened. We are going to have our crisis team is in place to support kids with social emotional needs throughout the day tomorrow. We are going to have Uliance. It's our third-party provider for mental health, for some healthcare access for our staff members, available for staff members that might need someone to talk to, okay? So we're gonna have those sorts of pieces in place throughout the day tomorrow, and as always, as needed. We will also have police on site tomorrow morning at North, not because we're worried about a safety issue there tomorrow, because this has been fully resolved from the police perspective. They have someone in custody. However, we know that police make people feel more comfortable. So having police there tomorrow morning will make people feel more safe. So when you see police cars, et cetera, in place, that's our why for that in the morning tomorrow. Thank you for letting me address that, President Hurd. I appreciate it.
No problem. Okay. I'll begin with the roll call. To my far right, I have Trustee Ahmed Ismail. Next to him is Trustee and Dr. Christopher Lee. To the left here, to his left, is Vice President and Trustee Colleen Warden. My name is Joseph Hurd. This is our Superintendent, Dr. John Dean, Trustee Lisa Pappas, Trustee David Brumbaugh, and Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Roy Bishop. We now move to Roman numeral 2, approval of board agenda for today, December the 19th, 2022. And I'd like to recommend a revision of the agenda, that being to move agenda action items under Roman numeral 5A, B, and C to unite those under a consent agenda. And I'd like to put that forward as a motion.
Second.
Okay, so we have a second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes 7-0. We move now, I'm sorry, 6. Oh, thank you. Our trustee, Margaret Wirtz, is on her way from the airport trying to make this meeting, so thank you. So now we move down to Roman numeral 3, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Hurd. We are going to recognize some of our athletes. So I'm going to ask President Hurd and Mrs. Davis, the athletic director from North, and Mr. Wheeler, the athletic director from South, join me at the podium, please. Sure, thanks. This is always one of the most exciting things that we do from a Board of Education level, because we're going to actually get to see our kids up here and we're going to recognize you. Having said that, it's complicated, and here's why it's complicated. So many of you are so good, like there's so many people to recognize. So sometimes, like when we're going to recognize, let's say, some students that did this one thing, we might have 4 or 5 students up here. But in a minute, I'm going to make a list. I'm going to provide a list of all of our teams that reached regional or better, or our individuals that reached regional or better in 2 seasons, both our spring season and our fall seasons at both our high schools. If we had all those students up here, that would be 80 or 90 students or more. Some of whom don't even go to our schools any longer, because many of those spring athletes, not all of them, I see the baseball players in front, graduated already. And I know some of them are able to come back, but many of them aren't even around right now. So what we're going to do is this, okay? We're going to call you up by school in season. So we are going to do, for example, spring North first. And we're going to have all those athletes come over here, and if they kind of spill over there, even if you block a board member, the board members will understand, okay? And then I'm going to read a script of some of the general accomplishments, okay, like this team did this thing. But then I'm going to pass the microphone down, and we're going to have you at least introduce yourself and say your sport, okay? Does that seem fair and reasonable? I saw some groans from some students there. Sorry about that, guys. And ladies and gentlemen. And we'll ask coaches. I see we've got a couple of coaches here from both South and North for different sports. Please come up with your athletes, okay? So why don't we start with spring 2022. So this is last spring. North students, come on up, ladies and gentlemen. Fill in over here, and you can go next to Mr. Wheeler if you need to. So these are all of our spring North students. And Mr. Shubnell, why don't you scoot right next to me? Because you're actually, are all of them baseball players to our right? Okay, then we're going to cheat with you, and you're going to introduce them in just a second. Seem fair? Okay. So let's talk about our spring 2022 Norsemen, okay? We had numerous students do some amazing things on the field of athletics. Our girls tennis team finished 8th place in the state finals. Congratulations to them. We have, for girls track, Ava Hopko advanced to state finals tournament for 3 events. Shot put, where she finished 10th, discus, where she finished 19th, and high jump, where she finished 15th. And for boys golf, we had a graduated senior who made it to the state finals, and that's Nico Karoutsis. Congratulations, Nico. And then we have Mr. Kevin Shubnell, the boys baseball coach. He'll tell you, introducing the gentleman to our right in just a second. But our boys baseball team at North made the state finals and finished in 2nd place.
Thank you, Dr. Dean. With us tonight, I'll go from my right across here. Assistant coaches Ryan Lieger and Steve Pleath. And with us tonight, we have Cam Schaefer, Jordan Arsenault, Shane Armbruster, Drew Hill, Brendan Hill, Luke Shanley, Rocco Cardinelli, Josh Stevens, Brady Beers, Nick Jarakis, Ben Suarez, and Ben Prate.
Thank you, Mr. Shubnell. Gentlemen, congratulations. Now is this going to get complicated? All these board members are going to want to shake your hand, as you normally do, right? So why don't you just turn and start filing that way, and you can file right in front of them, okay? Including the coaches. They'll be happy to shake your hand, too. And then stay down on the right over there, and Mrs. Howlett's going to take your picture.
Oh, yeah. He was for little bitty kids when Troy was playing.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
And actually, when Tim was playing, they were small kids.
Yeah. While Mrs. Howlett is taking the picture of our North athletes, could we have our Spring 2022 South athletes come up to the stage? Down here. Coach Sonnenberg, I'll also steal you and have you stand to my right because you can introduce some of your athletes. And Coach Nolan. Come join us up here. Nice to see you, Mark. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's all good, Mark. All right. So let's talk about recognizing our outstanding South student athletes from the spring. We have a variety of teams and individuals, okay? We have boys golf with an 11th place state finish. We have girls tennis with a fourth place state finish. We have a variety of girls track state qualifiers, and I'll introduce all the names here, and then in a second, Mr. Sonnenberg will introduce the ones that are here. Does that seem fair? Because I might miss, there might be a disconnect between those two possibly.
Got it.
So we've got Morgan Dienick, Megan DeGrand, Selja Jansen, Ella Pechtowski, Chloe Roy, Savannah Spangler are all of our girls state track qualifiers. Our boys track state qualifiers are Michael Wolahan, Chaz Mathis-Balatko, Brendan Downey, and Logan Detweiler. And then we have a sailing national championship regatta qualifiers for our South sailing team. And now I'm going to turn it over to the two coaches on the right to introduce the athletes who are here. And if there's any that we missed, we'll get them on the microphone. Seem fair?
Absolutely. There you go. So for boys spring, Logan Detweiler is here. You can wave to everybody, Logan. He qualified in both the 1,600 meter and in the 4x800. Then we have Chaz Mathis-Knuth, and he qualified in the 4x800. And Brendan Downey is over there, and he qualified also in the mile, in the 1,600 meter. And that's for the boys. And Savannah, I know you qualified in multiple events, but I can't speak to each one. I know it was the mile and the 2, right? And did you do a third? And the 4x8 as well. And young lady, forgive me, I forgot your name. Morgan Dienick. You're Morgan Dienick. Got it. I'm the boys coach. Please forgive me. But Morgan, you are also in the 4x8? And the mile and the 2 mile.
Okay, so and representing sailing today, we have Eric Breeden and Charlie Geminer. And so last spring, the boys and girls, we were a co-ed team, but it was mostly boys that attended, qualified for Baker Team Race Nationals in Houston, Texas, and also for the Phoebe King Invitational, which was in Norfolk, Virginia.
Now, have you all been introduced, or did we miss an athlete? You all good?
Can I mention who's not here? You told me to do that. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Michael Wolahan also qualified in the 4x8. He is, like Chaz, a graduate, and he had his wisdom teeth taken out this morning, so he couldn't be here today. But he also qualified. Thank you.
Awesome. Congratulations again, South athletes. If you go down there, they'll take your picture. Oh, I forgot about shaking hands. Do that weird little snaky handshaky thing. And coaches, too. Thank you, coaches. We got 2 more sets of athletes. And we got fall.
Thank you. Yeah. Congratulations. Good job. Thank you. Congratulations. Congratulations. Good job. How are you? Hey. I'm good. How are you doing? Nice to see you again. Congratulations.
Now, while they're getting their picture taken, could we have the fall 2022 North athletes come on up to the stage? Come on up to the line there. Coach Cooper, good to see you. So we have many athletes from North High School this past fall, so that was actually just a couple weeks ago, seasons completed, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, get to a really high level from an athletic perspective. For our girls swim and dive, we had the following state qualifiers from North: Avery Beal, Kaylee Hard, Lauren Loper, Maggie McSkimming, Riley Nugent, and Addie Wakefield. And to give you some details, Addie Wakefield, Riley Nugent, Avery Beal, and Kaylee Hard qualified for states in the following events: the 200 medley relay, the 200 free relay, and the 400 free relay. We had our boys tennis team for a 13th place state finish. Congratulations, boys tennis team. And then I'm going to turn to Coach Scott Cooper on the left, who's going to introduce his athlete who's here.
We have Lillian Deskins, sophomore, qualified to the state finals, is now on our record board in the gym for one of our top runners ever at North. Had a fantastic time in the 1857, that's what the elite runners are able to do. And she's looking forward to some great success in track and then cross country for a couple more years here.
Thanks, Scott. All right, and I see this whole line of gentlemen over to the right. Scoot this way a little bit. Let's introduce yourselves with your names, because I don't know them. But come on over, guys. The mic won't go too far. Why don't you tell us your name and your sport, okay?
All right. I'm Douglas Graham, and I was part of the varsity tennis team.
I'm Greer Amali, and I was also part of the varsity tennis team.
My name is Caden DePascal, and I'm a varsity tennis member.
I'm Daniel Michael, varsity tennis.
Congratulations to all of our North athletes. If you want to shake hands in that snaky way, there you go. There you go. Have a good Christmas.
We got a lot to see from you coming up. Congratulations.
Yeah, your coach goes. Just get your hand shaken. And now, we have our fall athletes from Grosse Pointe South High School. So if any fall athletes from Grosse Pointe South want to come on up. And as Mr. Wheeler pointed out, a couple repeat athletes, which is great. We love repeat athletes and repeat coaches, Mr. Sonnenberg. Welcome back, Coach Nolan. All right, so I'm going to go through the list for Grosse Pointe South High School. Our field hockey, we're state quarterfinalists. Our girls golf, we're 5th place state finals. Our boys tennis team was 8th place this year. And from that, we actually had the #1 single state champion in Connor Stafford. Congratulations, Connor. We have swim and dive, placed 5th in the state. And now I'm going to turn to the two coaches on the right to explain their athletes' accomplishments.
Very good. Logan Detweiler makes a return trip. He was All-State in 2022. This year, he was academic All-State and represented us well. He was just 6 seconds. Am I getting that right, Logan? It's just 6 seconds off the school record. I have remarked that he goes down as South's best ever distance runner. So congratulations to Logan.
And representing sailing again, we have Charlie Gemeiner, Eric Breeden, and we also have Teddy Gemeiner, who's a new 8th grade member of the sailing team, started this fall. Really exciting. This fall, we won the state championship. Again, this was our second back-to-back state title championship, and we also went on to qualify for districts, which was held at Chicago Yacht Club, and finished 3rd. So they did a great job. I should add too, there is some core members not here also sailing this fall were Gavin Webster, Colin Hexter, and Braden Vogel.
And again, I'm the boys coach. Savannah, forgive me, you qualified for the girls, much like Logan did. In is this your first year qualifying or second? Second year in a row, just like Logan. Savannah Spangler.
And I think it's hard for me to see over here. Were all of you introduced by name at this point? All of you? Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. Make the yes around and congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Congratulations. Good job. Congratulations. Good job. Congratulations. Good job. Good job. Thank you. Good. Keep it up. Yeah, keep it up.
Let's do one
Good
big
job.
thank you. One last round of applause.
Congratulations, Coach. Thank you.
Could we have one more round of applause for all of our amazing athletes? Thank you both. Thank you both. And I should have checked. I didn't miss somebody, did I? No, I don't see anyone waving furiously at me. That concludes the superintendent's report, Mr. Hurd.
All right, thank you. We move down to Roman numeral 4, public comments on agenda action items for today, December the 19th, 2022. We welcome comments and questions related to matters within the purview of the Board of Education. Prior to addressing the board, we recommend that speakers first discuss their topic and seek resolution with relevant staff and administrators, culminating with the superintendent. The board will not discuss individual student or staff matters or pending litigation in this forum, and the chair will rule those comments out of order, as well as any commenters who use inappropriate language, such as profanity or other language that disrupts the order of this meeting. Comments are addressed to the chair and are limited to 3 minutes. But we are happy to discuss any matters further outside this formal meeting. When called to the podium, please state your name and city of residence. And we have 3 persons: Stephanie Listman, Richard Schroeder, and Pamela Perkowski.
Gentleman wants something for us. Yeah, if you fill up, we'll still take care of you.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Listman. I'm a resident of Grosse Pointe Woods. I'm here because of what happened at North today, and I am just really disappointed that we are not prioritizing the safety of our kids, and instead we are looking at providing them health care. That's our job as the parents. Your job is to keep them safe at school. My kids did not feel safe at school today, and I did not feel they were safe at school. We do not check backpacks. We do not have metal detectors. We need to put metal detectors in. That is a basic that all high schools should have at this point. You are taking money from the sinking fund, which the voters approved, to keep our kids safe, warm, and dry, to boost Corwell's bottom line so that they can bill the state for their services. As a voter, I don't appreciate that. As a voter, I'm going to be very hesitant to vote for another millage if you're not going to keep your word that the funds are going to keep our kids safe, warm, and dry. I urge you to reconsider spending $1 million to boost Corwell's bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dick Schroeder, Grosse Pointe Park. I'm sorry, Mr. Dean, you guys actually had to live through what you guys lived through today. That's tough for anybody, and I hope it never happens. I don't know if you have public safety in all your buildings all the time, but my brother was one of the guys that ran into Oxford that day, and I'm sure these guys ran in without even shaking blinking an eye. But as far as the clinic goes, as I've said before, I'm neither for or against it. I'm not a specialist in that. But I do think that you guys could do a much better deal than what you're doing. Basically, you're footing the bill for a Corwell clinic. They're going to get $350,000 a year, which is going to pay for those salaries of the people that work there, plus some. So from the very beginning, they're getting a free clinic that we're paying $1 million for, and they're paying nothing. I don't know who's buying the gloves, who's buying the alcohol for the handy wipes, but the price is unbelievable. As I said before, it's exorbitant. You're paying for an operating room for a medical clinic. That's like paying for a Chevy. It's like paying for a Cadillac and getting a Chevy. It just doesn't make sense to me. I just hope you guys table this, sit back, and get a much better deal. Because this Corwell, they're using as a funnel. They're going to take every patient they get that goes through there, and if they need extra, they're going to go right into Corwell's patient numbers. You're doing way too much, and they're putting no skin in the game. We're putting all the skin in the game. Please take your time and get a better deal. As I said, I'm not for or against it. I'm not that specialist, and I'm sure you guys looked into it, but it just doesn't make sense to me. And the only other thing I've got to say is I was at the last meeting, and I know you guys all listen to people. I know it doesn't go in one ear and out the other. But what I found confusing about the meeting last time was there was a gentleman that was the mayor of Grosse Pointe Woods, and Mr. Ishmael asked if he could talk, and Mr. Hurd said, no, you can't talk. We've already had comments, and he could have commented in public comment. But yet the salesman for Corwell was offered the chance to come back and talk to fact check Ms. Pappas in live time. And I don't understand how that's following any rules of parliamentary procedure where you turn him down, but then you get to pick and choose who comes up and talks and fact checks this young lady in real time. I'm sure you don't like to be fact checked in real time, and if these people offered that, you'd say no. That was, in my opinion, the wrong way to go about it. But that's just it didn't seem right to me. I hope you reconsider, next time you guys have a president, that you guys follow what's good for you is good for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Pamela Perkowski. I live in Grosse Pointe Woods. Regarding the clinic, just have a few questions. What's the hurry? This was voted on the Monday after Thanksgiving. Interestingly enough, 3 members that voted for this, their term is ended on the end of December. Another question, we had a bid of $700,000, now it's over $900,000. Perhaps you need to look into another construction company. Again, what's the hurry? There is another thing about we need the enrollment down is in our school. The enrollment is down in our schools. We're closing schools, but yet we're going to go into the clinic business. North has problems with their parking lot. Plenty of money needs to be spent for the parking lot. The roof leaks, the kitchen needs upgrading, and I understand that. Again, another question. I thought we were in the education business, not in the medical business. We need to invalidate this vote and again, try it again. And again, we have 3 new members coming in January of this year. I think that's when they need to take a vote on this because they're the ones that are going to be taking care of this $1 million problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Next three people are Will Broman, Doug Fielder, and David Warden.
Good evening. Will Broman, Grosse Pointe Farms. A couple weeks ago, I started using the Freedom of Information Act to get some data on the application and the MDHHS review of the grant application for the healthcare clinic. I sent a letter to the board after I got the application. I was respectful of Beaumont's wish to keep that information confidential. When I got the review comments, I was surprised, and I sent a letter to the board at that point. And not one board member has been able to reconcile with me, unless it ended up in my spam, in which case I apologize. But not one board member has been able to reconcile with me this notion that we have a need for medical services in Grosse Pointe North and in the district. And I say that because the review from MDHHS said that there was no evidence of need. And I've heard it time and time again up here that we have a need, we have a critical need, we have whatever. It isn't a medical need, and if you're going to say that, reconcile, figure out how you rebut what the public health professionals have said about our community's needs. The need is access to mental health care services. And so what we don't want to do, or what we shouldn't be doing, is spending $1 million to build a health care clinic when we really need to improve access to mental health care services. The MDHHS review team also noted that perhaps we applied for the wrong grant. There's an E3 grant that would not cost us $1 million in construction costs. So my ask as I close this out is that if you're going to say that we have a need in this community for medical services, how do you reconcile that with what the Department of Health and Human Services review team did? Because they're the professionals. I certainly am not. I don't know how to do that. But if you could reconcile that for me and for the public, I think we would all appreciate it. A couple weeks ago, I was cut off. I wanted to speak on a couple of different things, but there was a teacher recognition, and I want to take a moment and recognize one teacher that has had a profound impact on my life. And I reached for a ruler today, and I reached for the ruler that said, "Bio babies measure up with Zawada." And that refers back to my science teacher for 9th through 12th grades, Randy Zawada, and how profound of an impact she had on my learning career and ultimately professional career. So I think you may have already made up your minds on the clinic, and that's fine, but just don't say there's a medical need, because the state has said that there isn't. Thanks.
Thank you.
Doug Fiedler, Grosse Pointe Farms. Prior to coming over here this evening, I took a look at my 2 property tax bills. I looked at my summer bill, it had one reference to schools. The winter bill had 4 references to school. There was no reference to joint venture medical clinics on there anywhere. Now, I have no doubt that there's somewhere in the small print out there for the school board a justification for this, but as a resident of Grosse Pointe Farms for 5 decades, I do not believe there is a shortage of medical facilities in the Grosse Pointe area. I do believe, as somebody who values education a lot, that we can improve our schools. And there are a lot of smart people on this Board of Education, and there's a lot of people on the next one coming up. And I think that if you put your minds together, you could come up with many ways to spend $1 million better than you're contemplating to do. At the very least, I think you should table this to the next board. You're going to have on that board someone who's got more experience in the medical field than anybody else on the board, I suspect, and anybody else in the audience. That'd be Sean Cotton. He knows something about running a medical business. And I know Dr. Lee there a little bit because he operated on my knee in 1990, and it still works. Thank you, Dr. Lee. Good job. So that's it. I think this is a mistake. I think you guys are going out of your lane. Joint venture clinic, this is not what you do. You concentrate on improving our schools. That'd be my request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, David Warden, Grosse Pointe Woods. As the previous comments were made, there are a lot of intelligent people on this board, a lot. And I'm here tonight to thank those that are exiting. We have Dr. Lee, a brilliant physician who spent so much time. And that's the thing for the new board coming in. Do you realize how much time this takes if you want to do this job right? Dr. Lee, he spent a ton of time. Margaret, her work here for 8 years has been incredible. Joe, you're the biggest loss to this community. It saddens me. I know how much you worked. I know what you did. You've done so much, and I'm so sad that the people haven't kept you, retained you. I just wanted to say, you guys come up here every 2 weeks, you hear all these negative comments, and the bottom line is you do what's best for the students. I know it, and I'm sad to see you depart. And instead of saying something negative, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Dr. Lee, thank you to Joe, and thank you to Margaret. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. James Joseph II.
Good evening. I'm sad that Ms. Wirtz isn't here. I just wanted to thank the outgoing board members. It's been a tremendous effort that you've been here for. So Dr. Lee, I know that you're a physician. You have much better ways to spend your time probably, but I also know that you care about the people in this community, and that's why you're here. And for me, your time on the board is, I think, exemplified in part by, remember last week we were discussing, or last month, there was a discussion about how to use Trombley. And there were a lot of really smart, intelligent questions. And then you asked, would the students like that? And to me, that exemplifies, I think, your time here. Focus on the students and doing everything you can for them. I'm sad Ms. Wirtz isn't here. I remember when she did not have the votes to send our kids back to school and do the brave and right thing. She was the only one who, up there publicly, before the election, before the votes came in, and before she had support, said, asked the administration to get the kids back to school. And that was a lot because I felt like I was insane. A lot of parents felt like we were insane. I am kind of insane, but it was good to see that someone that we elected supported us and what was best for our kids. Mr. Hurd, I'm sorry to see you go. I actually competed for your spot one time, several years ago. I think the community made the right choice then. And twice I have told different people that there's a lot of different perspectives, but I really appreciate the perspective that you bring, and I really want you to know that I appreciate your time of leadership on this board. It was a very tumultuous 2 years, and when you had the ability to do so, you did the right thing and the brave thing. You brought our kids back ahead of what the experts and the teachers wanted. I think that showed real leadership, and that's something that I'm grateful for and that I'll remember. And I appreciate your time very much. So to the outgoing board members, thank you for spending your time doing this. Thank you for spending your time for our kids. Thank you for letting us come and yell at you once a month. It's really important. And often after everybody got done with their comments, you'd all say something really smart, and many of us would realize that we hadn't actually considered the issue as much as the three of you had. So my appreciation to the three outgoing board members.
Thank you. That's the end of our public comments. We move down to Roman numeral 5, agenda action items for today. And the agenda was revised to combine A, B, and C. So do I have a motion on those three?
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded rather. So then, since we've already discussed that, all in favor of those three, say aye. Aye. Okay, those pass 6-0. We move down now to Roman numeral D, approval of North Clinic GMP. You have a motion? Okay, from Dr. Lee.
Second.
A second from Vice President Warden. Okay. Any discussion?
I'll go. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. I did want to apologize for not being here last week. I had an unfortunate trip to the emergency room the day before, so I was absent last week when this was discussed a little bit. One of my, I was against the clinic at $700,000. I'm certainly against spending going on $1 million of sinking fund money. And I just want to remind, this was put out by the Grosse Pointe District in 2019, and I want to just read number 2. Again, this was put out before the vote in the election for the last sinking fund. And the language that the district published in order to encourage voters to vote for the sinking fund, this was what was put out in their official literature. This is a 1 mil sinking fund that was first approved by voters in 2004. This millage expired with the 2019 levy. 0.9687 of this 1 mil is a renewal. The proposal seeks to restore and extend the levy to 1 mil and expand its use per new Michigan legislation. Revenue will be used for priority projects which keep our school buildings and grounds safe and in good condition. This millage provides approximately $3 million of the $10 million annual cost to maintain Grosse Pointe Public School System school facilities. Revenue from this proposal, and please listen carefully, can only be used for funding the construction or repair of school buildings and facilities, school security improvements, and acquiring or upgrading technology. Sinking fund projects completed during the last 5 years included replacing roofs, boilers, flooring, windows, restrooms, concrete, tuck pointing, and more. And at the bottom, of course, says vote at the polls Tuesday, November 5th. So in reading that, I don't see anything about building $1 million health clinic. As a matter of fact, to me, it shouldn't even be eligible to use this money to build a health clinic. It says right in the official ballot language to convince people to vote for this sinking fund. Making a move to use this money to build a clinic when we have so many critical needs in our buildings that are not fixed is irresponsible. We have a fund equity of 9.6. The economy, I don't know about you, but I'm not having a good feeling about where our economy is headed, where it's currently and where it's headed. And when economies tighten and when inflation goes up, and many of the reasons for the added costs, oh, well, the project, the materials are higher, and there's all these supply chain issues and things. And I'm on the facilities committee, so I hear these conversations when we have the meetings. And so in an inflationary economy, to go and spend money, and we're not talking chump change, out of money that's supposed to be there to fix our buildings. And I do take it a little personally because we've had other projects that needed to be done. I'll tell you what, the arts department had a pit. We have a motorized pit in our auditorium that broke, and it was broken for a long time. I have personal friends that played in that pit and played instruments with amplifiers and things plugged in near standing water. Those were personal stories told to me by multiple people that I know personally. And it took forever and a day to get that mechanism fixed and the money spent to fix that. That is part of what we do as an educational system. Maybe you don't think it's important to have a musical or a choir concert and an orchestra concert. We finished ball fields. We just honored all these athletes today. How lucky they are that we're willing to spend the money to make sure they have turf to play on, that they have good fields in good condition to play baseball. We've put a lot of money into those things. We have 3 pools that are middle school pools who are in really serious disrepair. Things that when I came in, I took for granted when we moved here 20 years ago that my kids had a pool at their middle school. Now we have 3 pools we can't afford to fix. But we have $1 million to build a clinic, and it's not that I'm against providing health care. That's not the issue. The issue is that why did they approve Grosse Pointe's grant over another school in another community that had a much higher need than we did? But they got turned down and we got, you know why? Because they say Grosse Pointe, they'll spend the $1 million to build our clinic. It's corporate welfare. You're giving money off the backs of our children to fix the facilities in our district that are there for education, they're there for the arts, they're there for sports, all of the things that we came in. And let's not forget, our kids for a couple years lost. I have a kid that is now 19, and I have one that's 18. They hit, especially the older one, that pocket of COVID where their junior, senior year was totally derailed. All the dreams, all the things they looked forward to doing when they got to high school disappeared because of COVID. So when we talk about mental illness, how many of those kids suffered because they didn't get to play that baseball game or the soccer game, or they didn't get the lead in the musical, they didn't get to have their choir concert? They didn't have a commencement. If we go back to 2020, those kids didn't even have their commencement ceremony. Those are what we're here to give and here to provide, and our kids lost a lot of that. But now we're going to look aside from all the things that we're trying. Now they're getting those opportunities. Look at all these athletes tonight. How amazing that they were able to create all those records and have all those experiences again. Would they have them if we don't have money to provide those things? Would you rather us get into the healthcare business so that Corewell can make money? Because this is what it's about. We're spending $1 million when we have multiple ways to access healthcare in this community, and we're inventing a need, and we're spending tax dollars, and here's what it says. Nowhere in there says you can take $1 million out of a sinking fund and use it to build a healthcare clinic, which will have ongoing costs. We're not done at the mill, folks. We're going to have ongoing costs every year that we're absorbing for this clinic. So why don't we focus on what we should be focusing on, academics, all the enrichment activities that our district has been known to provide for our students, Let's make sure that they have safe and adequate facilities. The Oxford families that had the Oxford shooting a year ago raised a big issue over a similar clinic. After having a school shooter, they raised questions about having other people coming into their premises. This is a safety issue, and nobody sitting up here has taken the time. They just, no, we got to pass the clinic. We got to do it now. You haven't taken the time to consider safety or liability. And those are two big, huge issues with this clinic, and two of the main reasons beyond the fact that it's inappropriate use of our tax dollars that I will be voting no. But I also resent the fact that I've been repeatedly hushed, accused of spreading misinformation, and actually when I was accused of spreading misinformation, I was trying to relate a first-person conversation with Jeff Cook from Beaumont that I had when I toured the River Rouge facility. I was repeating what he told me, and then I was interrupted and told I was spreading misinformation. I watched the meeting last week, sick, unable to attend, and I asked for my regrets for not being able. I had a serious issue, health issue. I could not be here a week ago. Was not acknowledged, but they acknowledged my empty chair as though I had just decided not to come. Gave that impression. And then I spent listening to a meeting where, without having the opportunity to have my voice at the table, I had to hear all kinds of ridiculous things spread about my intentions or what I had done. Oh, did Mrs. Pappas ask any questions at the facilities meeting? Guess what? I've been asking questions since the first time I heard about this clinic on November 3rd. That was the first time I got information, was November 3rd. And I've emailed information to this administration. I wasn't able to get the answers for some of the questions I asked, actually, but we had board members that felt welcome to try to discredit me last week by telling, well, did Mrs. Pappas ask any questions at the facilities meeting? The last one where they said that the cost was $215,000 higher. I listened to all the excuses for it, and I got up disgusted at the end of the meeting and walked out. Disgusted. There were no more questions. I'd been asking questions since November 3rd and not always getting answers for my questions. So, and then this is a public document. I shared that document with a sitting board member and 2 board members to be. And several days later, I had a call from the media, and I answered and truthfully answered their questions. I did not run to anyone to give them the document. It's a public document, by the way. So this entire process has been rushed. It has not been thought through. And we don't have the money in our budget, so $1 million and ongoing costs. What else are we not going to fix on these critical needs after we spend this money? We're going to spend the money, then what? And if we are determined to not have enough students utilizing the clinic or enough community members or whoever's going to be allowed in this clinic, then, oh well, maybe we have to shut down. Maybe we spend almost $1 million and then they close it down. What then? Then what did we do? So I'm absolutely against this proposal. I'm very disturbed by some of the actions that have taken place in the last couple of weeks. I'm very frustrated with the fact that being on the facilities committee, the grant was given in May, and all summer and all early fall, there was no tour of any clinics, there was no facilities presentation, and when I said that we did not use our standard procedures, we did not. When Ed Lazar wanted to build a field house, he came and presented to the facilities committee. There were lots of presentations, the Poupard deal, they came to the facilities committee and did their presentation. Not the Beaumont Clinic. The first presentation was to the full board on November 14th. All I got was the information in a packet and a presentation by Deputy Superintendent Matheson at the facilities meeting on November 3rd. So what happened from May to November 3rd? And I'm on the facilities committee and not a conversation? And then we voted on the day after Thanksgiving? And I said it before, it's DC politics at its worst. Pass it through by holiday and get it rushed through before anyone has an idea of what's going on. It's bad business, it's bad government, and I'm just appalled that we would be spending this kind of money, which we don't have, by the way. We need to use it on other things. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Dr. Lee?
Yes. Okay, so I am also on the facilities committee, and I've been to these meetings. The thing about this clinic that I've noticed is it seems that there's a certain opposition to the idea of a clinic in our school, and then people will dig around and try and find reasons to oppose it. And when I first heard about this clinic many months ago, I was opposed to it. I thought, we're not in the healthcare business. I was opposed to it. And then I started listening and paying attention to the reasons for it, and I changed my mind. So the idea of $1 million for a clinic, Mrs. Pappas spoke about the elevator on the stage at Grosse Pointe North. That's that stage that lifts people or pianos or whatever from down below up onto the stage. That is a $500,000, what I would consider kind of a luxury. I don't know if there's one at Grosse Pointe South. I don't even know that. I don't know if every high school has an elevator, but it's going to be $500,000 to fix that. The track at Grosse Pointe North, $820,000. I mean, I'm in favor of good tracks, good baseball fields. But this is kind of a balance. It's not academics to have a elevator lift on the stage. That's not academic. You can argue that running track helps with academics. Playing a musical instrument helps with academics. So does a good breakfast help, because we know that if you're hungry, you don't learn. And the same thing holds true if you have medical issues that aren't being taken care of. It's hard to learn when you're having an asthma attack. It's hard to learn when you're sick. And what the American Academy of Pediatrics has said, these high school clinics keep kids healthier, it improves their grades, and it improves graduation rate. So if you want to argue with me, please do. But the American Academy of Pediatrics feels that these clinics are good. The thought of an uptick of $250,000 or $280,000, yeah. What happened is Turner, our main company, our main contractor, looked at the need for this clinic and told us $700,000. They had not sought out bids from the plumbers and the painters and the electricians and all of that, but their experience said a project like this is $700,000. This is a terrible time to be hiring tradesmen. So all of their estimates have been off, some as much as 50%. This one's in the neighborhood of, 30%. So yes, their estimate that was given to us was for $700,000. And it turns out, okay, the plumbers, electricians, and whatnot are going to cost more than the original estimate. So it's $1 million, $820,000 for the track at North. 600,000, is it 600 or 400? 600,000 for the tennis courts? I love I played tennis in high school. I won the regionals. I love tennis. It's important. But $600,000 is a lot of money for tennis courts, and not a lot of kids play tennis. So I'm not as afraid of that $1 million if it's good for our kids, if it's going to keep them healthier, if it's going to keep them in school, if it's going to improve our graduation rate. I'm in favor of it. And these clinics have done that. The other thing is about, are we doing this to make money for Beaumont? The idea is Beaumont will never send out a bill to any of our families. If a visit is covered by insurance, they'll bill the insurance, but they will never send out a bill for a copay, or if somebody has no insurance, they will never send them a bill. Beaumont does not make a lot of money on these clinics. It's providing a service. And I know Dr. Murray at North has been on the advisory board at Beaumont Grosse Pointe, I think Beaumont Grosse Pointe. And that's when she learned about these clinics. And we are not like unique. There's over 100 of these clinics around the state. They're even putting them in elementary schools, and there's a few in middle schools. So this is a wave of the future. This is a good thing for our students. And I don't have a lot of political gain either from being on the left or the right. I'm concerned only about the students. And this clinic has a potential to help our students. And that's why I'm supporting it.
Thank you.
So this is now the third time I've spoken in favor of this. We've had a vote to affirm that we're going to have the clinic here, and now we are simply voting on whether or not the funding is going to be made available to provide the construction for the new clinic. I've said this, and I'll say it again because I think it's worth repeating, that I am always going to be in favor of things that provide affordable and accessible health care to our students and families. And when people come up here and say, well, there's a clinic on every corner, that's not really the same thing as what this clinic is going to provide. If you go to an urgent care, and even if you have good insurance, it's still going to cost a family anywhere from $50 to $100 for a copay. And that doesn't cover some of the other things too. And that's if you have good insurance. If you have no insurance whatsoever, you may be charged $150 to go to an urgent care. So this idea that there's an urgent care or a medical facility on every corner, it just doesn't really apply to many of our students. When they did the research to determine whether or not Grosse Pointe North was eligible and our community was eligible, they looked in to see what kind of financial burdens are being put on our community because of our lack of affordable health care. The other thing I want to point out is that I trust Kate Murray. She's the principal of Grosse Pointe North, and she has done her homework, and she has laid the groundwork for why she believes that this clinic is important for Grosse Pointe North. I think it is not a good idea for us to second guess what our administrators and what the principal of our high school thinks that we need in our community and in her school. She's there every day. She sees the sickness that kids face coming to school. They don't have access to go to a health facility. She certainly sees the mental health services that are necessary in the school. And this clinic is going to provide much needed, not only physical health services, but also mental services. And I think after today, we know that there's probably going to be even more need for mental health services after something like today happens. So I just think it's a real mistake for us to second guess what some of our administrators, especially the principal of our high school, has told our community that she thinks our school needs. The final thing I'll say is that, I'll echo what Dr. Lee said, is that these clinics have been wildly successful. Like Dr. Lee said, when I first heard about this, I'm like, is that something we need? But then the more I look around and the more research I do, I see them in so many high schools that I never even knew existed. My office is located in Mount Clemens. As I was coming from court one day, I noticed that I think it's either the middle school or the high school. It's one of the, whichever school's on Cass has one of these clinics. It's not Beaumont, I think it's Henry Ford. But this isn't novel. It's certainly not new. It's been tested out, and I support it. And although I wasn't pleased with the amount of money that it was increased, we all know that the cost of living, especially construction costs, have gone up astronomically in the last year or two. So having been on the facilities committee, I've seen projects that have been much higher in cost than originally projected, or even before the bids come in. We estimate something and the bids come in much higher. And not one person has ever come to the podium to say, I'm outraged by this. Oh my gosh, you said the project was going to be this, and now it's $200,000 more. And having been on facilities, I saw this on a regular basis. This is the cost of doing business in this economy. So I said this last week, and I'll say it again, I don't understand all the outrage by this clinic when all of the cost overruns have been going on since I've been on this board. So again, I support this clinic. I think that I support Kate Marie and her venture to do this, and I think it's going to be a really good thing for our community.
I think my issue that I explained last week, and I've explained before on this issue, it has nothing to do with the clinic. It has to do with the source of funds that we're attaching to build this clinic. And the bottom line is the sinking fund was never proposed to the public to be used for joint ventures with hospitals. It was never proposed to do anything other than to repair our buildings, to fix parking lots, to fix leaking roofs, to fix things that we couldn't afford to pay out of the general fund. If the administration had come with a more creative way of financing this, perhaps I'd be voting for it, but I can't support anything that is taking money from the sinking fund, taking money, as Ms. Pappas outlined, with what we told the voters we were going to do with sinking fund money and using it for something else. And I think it's a coffin nail to passing any future sinking fund. So if you're not concerned about this, think about in 3 years or 4 years when we go to renew this. The people that don't want us to have a sinking fund are going to have a field day with what we're doing with this money. And I think it is so wrong that frankly, I don't even think it shouldn't even gotten beyond the point of discussion that we could use sinking fund money for this, because to me, it's totally improper. It's almost ironic that 3 years ago, or maybe it's 4 years ago now, I taught a class at the MASB State Convention on bond construction oversight, making sure promises made are promises kept. And it is so ironic to me that promises that we made to people to induce them to vote for the sinking fund back in 2019 were being so bold and so beyond belief as far as what we're doing with that money, to go into a joint venture with Beaumont Hospital and spend almost $1 million when similar clinics have been built. Henry Ford's built clinics where they paid for the entire build out. And if we want to have a clinic like this in the school, then I say, great, let's go back to the drawing boards and come up with a way to fund it that doesn't raid a third of what the voters give us for that sinking fund for a year. And I mean, that's really the bottom line for me. It's not that we don't need, or I wouldn't like to see a health clinic in the hospital, in the school, that's fine. But how it's being paid for is what I find so outrageous. And I can't overemphasize to all of you on this board of the ripple effect that this is going to have on passing any future sinking fund. And this is going to haunt us. And I want you to think long and hard about that when you pass this vote, because it is not just about this event, this clinic. This is about, we're telling the voters that, hey, we told you warm, safe, and dry for our buildings. You gave us $3 million a year, and we're spending it on a joint venture with Beaumont Hospital. And I think that is so wrong that, it's beyond wrong. And if there's an outrage, that's my outrage, is the source of funds we're using to pursue something like this. And I just can't support it. I wrenched with myself because I thought, well, this would be a great thing to have. Well, that's great, but not the way we're paying for it. Not the deal that we cut with Beaumont stinks. And we haven't used our skill sets that we have to negotiate a deal that makes sense for the community. And raiding the sinking fund is the wrong way to go, and I can't support this. Thank you.
I think safety has been brought up by a lot of folks tonight. And I know that safe, warm, dry, and connected was the tagline for the bond, not the sinking fund. But safety and academic achievement and taking care of the whole student should kind of be woven through all the decisions we make. So as Trustee Warden said, we've talked about this for a couple of meetings now, so I apologize if I run over some ground I've already covered. But some of the questions I asked myself when the clinic project was first come up is it needed? And like Trustees Warden and Lee had mentioned, it's not the kind of thing that you think about because it's not the kind of thing we've seen here yet. But what are the lessons that we've learned during the hard lessons we learned from COVID about the lack of physical and mental health resources in our school district and the impacts those have on kids? I think a lot of people thought that we still had school nurses everywhere and there were school psychologists and social workers, aplenty. And in fact, we learned that those do not exist, or their caseloads are so high as to dramatically circumscribe the effectiveness of those resources. We've also asked, people have brought up to the board the fair question, is this something that the school district could get in some other way through some other partnership or through the private sector or through something else in the community? And I think more has been made by cherry-picking language out of MDHHS reviewer comments than should be, given the fact that they ultimately approved the grant. So I'm a student of political philosophy. I'm a big fan of close reading, but at the end of the day, if you miss the forest for the trees, which is that the experts on this grant reviewed the whole picture of Grosse Pointe Public Schools and Harper Woods and said, yes, this is something that will have a positive impact here. I think that that's something that is more important than individual comments by individual reviewers. So I'm not sure if that answers the questions that were raised about that, but I do believe that from the lessons we learned from COVID, from the fact that we won a competitive grant process, and like my fellow trustees have mentioned, most of us have asked our teachers and staff, is this something that you need? And the answer is a resounding yes from everyone that I've talked to. And you hear stories about, challenges faced by students who deal with chronic conditions like asthma or diabetes or need controlled medications, to deal with ADHD, where you have to be very careful about administering the prescribed dosage at the prescribed time and making this a collateral duty on clinic moms and secretaries is not a fair thing to do, and it's not a thing that doesn't come without risk. So I think that those are all things we need to think about when we ask the question, is it needed? I think some folks have also brought up the question, is this a thing we can do? It's certainly within the authority of the school district to have a school clinic. I don't think anyone questions that. And it's allowed under the sinking fund. I know when we look at the campaign literature, they talked about the kinds of things you can spend a sinking fund on, but at the end of the day, you can use it for the construction and repair of facilities. It's allowable to do. The harder question comes down to, are we getting a good deal? And I think that this is where school finance becomes very complicated for folks that are not enmeshed in this every day to understand that we can't just kind of do anything we want wherever we want. We don't have sinking fund money available to just hire more counselors or doctors. You can't use that money for people. You can't use sinking fund money to erect a temporary building in a parking lot. So when you take restrictions like that and you compile them together, you end up with a more complicated and costly construction project than you might normally think, just looking at it from the outside. So keeping in mind those factors, which I would add are restrictions placed by the state legislature on how we are able to operate business. So if you have any complaints, please do share that with Lansing. I think you would find a lot of support from people on this stage for loosening our hands when it comes to how we operate. But this figure we've got from the current bid is a guaranteed maximum price based on an open market public bidding process, right? So this isn't just something we got from one internal estimate or one favored supplier. This is something that came out of an open public bidding process. And what I took away from our last meeting is that waiting, well, is always attractive to me to take our time and make choices in a deliberate way. It will certainly come with costs to the district in terms of cost escalations, lost efficiencies by debundling the project with the clinic project, then the kitchen project. And I don't know what else we would know or learn by waiting that would change the facts around this decision. The other piece of can we do this that has been brought up is, are we able to meet our other critical facilities needs? And that's a question I asked directly at the last meeting. Do we have a plan to meet all of the critical facilities needs we have over a reasonable time frame? And the answer is we have a plan. We have identified needs that we're addressing, but we do have $252 million in critical facilities needs over the next 10 years. No matter how carefully we spend the sinking fund, no matter how many projects we say no to, we're not going to be able to address all of those projects without going back to the voters for another bond and perhaps an enhanced sinking fund. It's the facts of life. So we could talk about any project that comes before the board and say, hey, could we do something else instead? And the answer will always be yes. So the question for me is this a good use of the funds we have to have the impact that we want to have on our kids? So that brings me to my third question is, will it help? We talk a lot about academic excellence and achievement gaps between test scores, between school rankings, between some of our buildings, and specifically between North and South. I don't think we can be serious about our pursuit of academic excellence or giving all of our kids opportunities to succeed if we don't recognize these disparities that help generate those disparate outcomes. One of the things that comes out of the grant review process, that comes out of listening to our experts, like my fellow trustees said, is that this is something that kids at North do not have access to in the same way that kids in South have access to. And that impacts their ability to be present in school and succeed in school. So I think that if what we want to do is see every kid do as well as they possibly can be, then we have to be serious about listening to those factors and do what we can to close those gaps. That comes down to treating some of the acute conditions I mentioned earlier, absences, dealing with long-term conditions, and having a resource available, not on a 2-month wait, not on a 2-week wait, but right there when you need it, when a student is having a mental health crisis. Because to circle back to the point I made at the very beginning, safety needs to be a thread that runs through all of this. So not only is this a thing that we need to do because we want to be serious about student success and help address some of the disparities that hold students back from achieving their full potential, but as I said, I believe it was 2 meetings ago, we need to be honest with ourselves about the fact that there are real safety risks that come with unmet mental health needs. And I don't know what the cause of the students' poor choice today that resulted in the lockdown was, but in plenty of places, students in mental health crises make bad choices that they cannot undo. And I think it is well worth the cost of the clinic many times over to identify those kids earlier on and intervene when we can make a difference to keep them safe and to keep all our kids and staff safe. So I think that when we talk about the safety issue, we need to be less concerned about imagined scenarios in which maybe something might happen with an outsider showing up to buildings, which at the end of the day are in an open campus and people from the outside can come to already, when we know that mental health and physical health are creating serious safety issues. And the net effect, I believe, as I've said before, will be for the positive on safety. I think at the end of the day, a couple of my trustees have also brought up an important question about community support for this and the community support for future tax issues, be them bonds or sinking funds. And I do agree that there has been disagreement in the community over this, but I don't agree that the community is split. I don't think any of us has done survey work to know exactly what that divide is. I can tell you I've talked to many more people, both inside the schools and outside of the schools, who've been supportive of this than opposed to it. But that doesn't mean that the people who are opposed to it don't want what's best for kids, or that they don't have reasonable questions. Unfortunately, we can't predict the future. If the question of this comes down to, will enough kids utilize it? Will, the grant be renewed? Will Beaumont be sustainable for the next 50 years? Will it, address all of the needs that we're hoping it will address? None of us can predict the future. But I see that all of the indicators to me show that this thing will deliver on the promises that have been made, that the grant funding will be sustainable as it has been for 36 years for 200 some clinics, and that there are more pathways to success for this clinic than not. I recognize that and appreciate the sources of uncertainty and unease flagged by members of the community, but I think that when it comes down to it, when people judge the success of the clinic, and if this is a responsible and appropriate use of sinking funds, they're going to be judging this board and this clinic based on the effects it has and the benefits it brings to our community, our kids, and our staff. So to me, while it's impossible to predict the future, and if this clinic does not succeed, I know that I and my fellow board members will be held accountable for that choice, but I have full confidence, having done my due diligence on this, having participated in these meetings, having peppered administration and Beaumont and all of our partners with questions, that this is a sound investment that will generate positive effects for our communities, our community and our kids, and that I think will, through the test of time, come to garner the support of the voters in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Words, I know you're coming in just now, but would you like an opportunity to speak on the clinic?
I'm supporting it, and I think I said my reasons last meeting. This is really good for our community, it's good for the students, and when I make my decision on this or any of the decisions, it's what is best for kids and what are the people in that school, the administrators, the teachers, the staff really want for the kids and know what will do the right thing by them. So I'm in support of this.
And I would be the last person, and as opposed to going over what several of our board members have said in great detail, I think it comes down, in my opinion, to what Mrs. Wirtz just said. Is this best for kids? Is there a need, and is it something that we can support? And based upon, I believe, 36 years of that funding being there in other schools, I think that that's not an issue. In terms of, is it legal for us to pay for it out of the sinking fund? I think Mr. Brumbaugh did a very good job of answering that question, and I'm for it. And again, we've talked about this, and I think one of the things that's important is not, at the end of the day, whether or not everybody truly agrees, but whether or not everyone had an opportunity to speak their piece. And I believe that we have on this matter, as well as every other matter. At least that's been the intent of this board. So we can, I think maybe the way to handle the vote is to go down to each member individually, starting with Mr. Ismail.
No.
Okay, Dr. Lee?
I'm a yes.
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 Okay, I'm yes.
No.
Ms. Pappas?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that passes 5-2. We move down to Roman numeral 5E, approval of North Kitchen GMP. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. And it's moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion?
President Hurd?
Yes.
I just have a short comment. This North Kitchen sort of typifies what we've been up against with the bond money and all these repairs and whatnot. This board approved the cooler several weeks ago because the cost of those gigantic coolers keeps going up and up and up and up. So it was appropriate, let's buy the cooler, get going on that, and then follow through with the rest of the stuff that needs to be done to fix the North Kitchen. So I'm obviously in favor of this, but it just shows the way the Facilities Committee has been working all this time. Do what we can as quick as we can and get ahead of the curve, get ahead of supply chain issues, get bids when they're likely to be lower, because, as people get busier, they raise what their bids are going to be.
True.
So anyway, that was just a little something about this kitchen project.
Okay. Mr. Ismail?
I have a question. Well, actually, Mrs. Matheson's not here. I'll ask Dr. Dean. I remember Ms. Matheson mentioning something about the kitchen, the food service fund not being able to have more than 3 months or I believe it was 3 months of operating profits in it before we violated something with the state.
Yeah, my recollection is generally the same, Mr. Ishmael.
And I'm wondering, are we taking the money to do this cooler to reduce those funds?
My understanding, and I'll get a confirmation to the Board of Education, is the food service proceeds, and I don't know the details why, I apologize for not knowing why, it's not my area of expertise, but you can't use the food service proceeds to pay for the cooler. That was explained, there was a reason at the Facilities Committee, it was explained, and I apologize for not having that detail. Mrs. Matheson, as we said earlier, wasn't going to be able to make this meeting, but I will certainly ask her that question when I see her first thing tomorrow morning, and I'll let the Board of Education know. I do know that's difficult, and I know I explained her absence and her why for her absence, so I do apologize for her not being able to be here right now to answer that question.
One other question, maybe you can answer. Is there a reason in particular on this job that our construction management fees are like 50%? I mean, normally they're 8 to 10%.
I will ask her to follow up. I know that's why we had Mr. Stempien and her here last week, and neither could be here this week. I apologize for them not being able to be here, but I will follow up with her.
Thank you.
I'm not certain about this, but I think that has to do with, this is a small project.
In general, but I agree with you, Dr. Lee. I know Mr. Ishmael, I mean this from a positive, he wants an exact answer, which I appreciate and respect.
Right.
But I agree with you that in general, this is like a small project relative to the cost of, let's say, redoing Richard or redoing this other piece. Mr. Stempien explained that at least in part last week, but I will check back with both of them first thing tomorrow morning and get an answer back out to all the board members.
Any additional comments or conversation? Okay. We'll handle the voting then as we did with the last agenda item. Mr. Ismail?
I'm a reluctant yes.
Okay. Dr. Lee?
I'm an enthusiastic yes.
I'm a yes.
Okay.
I'm a yes.
I'm a yes.
That's a yes for me.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That passes 7-0. And we move down to Roman numeral 5F, approval of Pierce Plaza GMP. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
And it's been moved and seconded. Comments?
I'll just make a comment on this project. I think one of the most important parts of this project is, and my understanding of it is that it will help make us make this ADA compliant so that anybody can access. Our old buildings are really difficult for people to navigate, and children, staff, visitors, anybody that might have, some kind of a disability, physical disability. And, I've really seen this up close and personal. So I think it's really important that, and there is a significant cost sometimes to doing that, but I think it is very important to do whatever we can to make these old buildings that have been around for so long accessible to everybody. And we have definitely an increased need for that, I believe, these days. So I'm in favor of this project, but I think that's one of the most important parts of this particular project. And spending the money on this is making our Pierce building accessible to everybody.
I absolutely agree with Mrs. Pappas. I drop my kids off at Defer every day. When I saw this, I was like, we need to redo the Pierce Plaza? But it's like we talked about before, when you ask questions, sometimes you discover things, and the ADA compliance piece at Pierce is big. Plus, it's been a long time since that plaza's had a refresh, and it'll be a really beautiful, accessible face for that building.
Any additional comments, conversation? Okay, move on. Mr. Ismail?
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Lee?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that also passes 7-0. We move down to Roman numeral 6, information and discussion. We have A, the monthly financial / check register / healthcare report.
Nothing unique to report. Mrs. Matheson included in the packet.
Okay. Unless we have any questions for that maybe. Okay, I think we can move to the next item then, which is B, board requests, and I don't have any. So we can move down to Roman numeral 7, future meetings. A, BOE organizational meeting, Wednesday, January 4th, 2023, 7 p.m. here at the Brownell Multipurpose Room. And then there's a BOE workshop, onboarding roles, relations, and that's Wednesday, January 25th, 2023 at 6 p.m. at the Morningside Boardroom. We're down at room number 8, public comments on non-action items. And we have 3 of these. Alyssa Wagner, Clint Derringer, and Maureen Krasner. Is Mrs. Wagner here?
Good evening, Elisa Wagner, Grosse Pointe Woods. So I'm just going to speak off the cuff, right? You already passed the vote. In my opinion, most of you have been so fiscally irresponsible, it's sickening. You forsook a $1.4 million offer on what was that, 389, the administration building, in favor of $1 million. And now you, okay, well, maybe I don't have all the facts and everything exactly right, but you did forsake an offer. And I understand the offer was made maybe a couple years ago, but nothing's set in stone. And there was no reason why you couldn't accept another offer, right? Okay, so you bypassed a lot of money there. Didn't you all lay off 25 teachers too? Something like that? No, you didn't lay off 25 teachers? Okay. Well, you guys have made some decisions that more than half of the community disagrees with. As far as this clinic goes, I just want to tell you, when I went through my secondary education classes to get my secondary education certification, the mentors teachers posed questions to the class and said, so what do you think the #1 job of a school is, right? Of course, everybody said, teach the kids. And they said, no. Your #1 job is to ensure the safety of the kids. So today you had an incident whereby someone brought a gun into school. Okay? No? Okay. Well, there was a lockdown, and of course, someone bringing a gun into a school is always a possibility. It's always a concern, right? As we know from Oxford. But when you have mentally unstable people, like community people, coming into the clinic, that's a big mistake. That's a huge mistake. So my biggest qualm about this clinic, I have a lot of qualms about this clinic. My biggest qualm, though, is that it's not just restricted just to the students that go to the school, okay? I do not feel safe with people who are having, very specific mental health issues from the community coming into the school to seek mental health services. That's a Pandora's box, right? I can't even stress enough how distressing that is. Good luck.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Clint Derringer, Grosse Pointe City. I wanted to say thank you to the entire board for your year of service, your terms of service, and obviously the 3 outgoing members. Thank you guys again. I said my thank you last time I was up here. I will hope that the future board is very clear with how we communicate about funding. I heard a lot of incorrect information, both from the podium here and from the stage. The sinking fund obviously is very different than the operating fund, very different than the bond fund. I know my wife, who's a teacher, came home and the conversation at school was about how the new clinic and the sinking fund usage was going to trigger the formula in the upcoming, the lack of fund equity is going to cause a trigger of the formula. And I heard it linked to the fund equity again coming from the stage today. Those are different funds. I hope we can be much more clear when we talk about these things because it's frustrating to deal with misinformation constantly in our community about funding for the school system. A little bit of logic about infrastructure, which I happen to know a little bit about. When you invest in infrastructure, you're just hoping something doesn't break, right? Construction costs almost never pay for themselves. There's almost never a payback. This particular project for the clinic, investing $1 million, unlocks services for our kids on an annual basis for the foreseeable future. That's a unique opportunity, and I thank you guys for leveraging that opportunity. Obviously, it's clearly within the rights of the sinking fund use because it's construction on your facility, and I know Mr. Ismail knows that as well. He's very, very clear on the rules and what's allowed. The next thing for me is I want to say happy holidays and happy new year to all of you guys. I hope that we can take a lesson from a lot of the spirit of giving and the spirit of care and looking out for one another. And remember that we're not judged only by how wonderful our highest achieving students and athletes are doing, but how we look out for those of us that need the services the most. The people that don't necessarily get every chance to advocate for themselves, the people that we don't know need the services that you guys are providing. I'm saying thank you on behalf of those people. So you guys have a great year.
Thank you.
Hello. I also wanted to say thank you. Thank you for your vote tonight. I think the clinic will be a wonderful and amazing addition to our schools. I've already spoken at this podium about it. And as Mr. Derringer just said, you know, if one student, if one family needs it, and this has been there for them, this is what you have done, is just save some lives, maybe helped a family that needs it. And that is a legacy that you should be proud of. So thank you very much. I also wanted to also wish you to thank the outgoing board members particularly for your service. I've enjoyed disagreeing sometimes and also agreeing with you. I also wanted to wish you all happy holidays. And on this, the second night of Hanukkah, I also wanted to say, particularly to the outgoing board members, a Hanukkah quote: "A candle is a small thing, but one candle can light another, and see how its own light increases as a candle gives its flame to the other. You are such a light." thank you for your service.
Thank you. Next, Dr. Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. We are at the time of the concluding time or the ending time for 3 of our board members on this stage. And on behalf of administration, I just wanted to say a couple of words about each of the 3 board members who all happen to be to my right, so I'm going to keep looking to my right. I'm not trying to ignore the people to my left. But we will have 3 different people sitting up on the board and serving the community, and we're excited for that opportunity. But I did want to take a moment to recognize these 3 board members. First, there is a small token of the district's abbreviation, a Pwabic tile, that recognizes your service on the Board of Education. So I hope you can take that home and you look fondly upon that. I was thinking about what to say about each of you, and I thought I would start with Dr. Lee, and I made 2 little lists for each of you, and the lists were like the things that I saw you do, but probably more importantly, like the things that I see who you are, right?
Be nice.
Oh. So, I mean, I think of the things that you do. I remember when you were running for school board 4 years ago, I remember you telling everybody it's more important to vote for the school bond. That's like more important than voting for me. Yes, I'd like you to vote for me, but voting for the bond is the most important thing. And like that will always I'll always remember that part, if that makes some sense, Chris. I remember your leadership on the facility committee and your work on that. The part, though, that when I think about you as a person that I guess impresses me the most is, like, you're this smart guy who's a doctor and has been a doctor your whole life, which means, like, you know, you operate on people, you're well compensated, all these sorts of things. But I've always found you have this ability to think about others, not through your own lens, but through their lens, and that's the definition of empathy. And I'm going to miss that. So, Chris, I've really enjoyed my time up on this stage with you. I'm going to go to President Hurd next, okay? Joe came in a very unique time. He was not at first an elected board member, he was an appointed board member. And he came in, I believe, several weeks before the pandemic started. Like the timing was almost like that, if that makes some sense. So Joe had these challenging times. He then did a great job on that, ended up being elected to a partial term, the 2-year term afterwards. And he has led this board, in my opinion, as the board president for 2 years, with civility, with kindness. Joe is regularly reminding me, like, John, assume the best of everybody. And Joe will be like, John, it probably won't go that way, but we're going to assume the best of everybody. And your kindness here to everyone, to the speakers, it doesn't mean you're kind in every single moment. Like, no one can be that person, but, like, you're much more kind than I ever would be. And I mean that, Joe. I admire that about you. So we're going to miss that up here. And then to Mrs. Wirtz, I'm saving you for last, because it's been 8 years, 2 full terms. I know you've been the board president. I know you've been the board vice president. I know you've been the treasurer. Were you ever the secretary? Okay, so you've done all 4 offices, okay? Which means you've done it all, right? You've been up here through bond issues, through sinking fund renewals, through reconfiguration, through a pandemic, all these really difficult things. But through that, your support for our staff, your support for process. In all 8 years I've known you, you're like, what's the process? What's our role? We're a governance board, so we need to be doing this. Your management, you need to be doing that. And included in that was accountability. And you and I have had more than our fair share of accountability conversations, right? And that's just truthful, okay? But I appreciate your commitment to process, your commitment to honesty, and your ethics. And Margaret, I'm really going to miss you up here. Most of my career, I've been fortunate enough to sit up on the stage with you, and I'm really going to miss you. So, President Hurd, I appreciate you letting me do my conversation at the beginning.
No problem.
Turn it back over to you guys.
All right, so we'll go with comments from other board members, all of us, if they wish to do so. Mr. Ismail.
Well, I'd like to file a complaint because Dr. Dean should not have been allowed to go first. He scooped me on a lot of things I would have said. And rather than repeating it all, I'll just wish you all good health and retirement. And thank you for your service. God bless all 3 of you. Joe, you have the patience of a saint. I don't know how you did what you do, but God bless you for doing it. And Margaret and Chris, enjoy. You can come now and talk for 3 minutes. Think about the possibilities. But good luck to all of you. God bless you and have a wonderful holiday.
All right, thank you. Dr. Lee?
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. Don't put the clock on me for this, this final thing. I had a whole thing I was going to my last board
Go
meeting
for
and
it.
blah, blah, blah. But I'll put it aside and just speak a little bit from the heart. First of all, this is a big deal to sit up here. You don't just do it for the meetings. There's a whole lot that goes on behind the board, or behind the board meetings. And I want to thank my wife and family for putting up with that. And I don't know how many hockey games I missed. And sitting next to me is Margaret. I made really good friends on this board. A lot of it's been not so nice sitting up here. But I've been on a lot of boards, St. John's, and I'm president of a big orthopedic group. Everybody's fighting for what they want. But up here, we have really good people fighting for the students. And I've made some really good friends, and it's fun to be up here when you're working with people and you have the same goals. You want a good educational experience for all the kids. And that has been really terrific, being with my friends up here on the board. Just a warning to the newcomers, you got some big shoes to fill. That these are really wonderful, two wonderful people that are going to be missing next month. The last thing, I was really proud to run with Joe. That's all I got.
I want to also say a few words about the outgoing trustees who I've enjoyed so much. Dr. Lee John was right. He thinks about other people first. When we were running together last time, 4 years ago, he'd say, vote for her first. He did the same with Joe. He sees in people what he admires, and he stands up for those people, and he's loyal. But he's also a logical, linear thinker. And on this board, he did his homework. He delved right into the reconfiguration and wanted to solve the whole thing himself. And I told him that's not how we do things. You don't have to solve it all yourself. We'll get to the answer, and we did. So I appreciate the person who comes here prepared with their homework done. And Joe was such a pleasure that you came to fill the spot of the vacancy 3 years ago. I couldn't imagine getting a better board member at all. That was just wonderful. You're just excellent president. You're calm and measured, fair, and really worked for win-win, to try to understand everyone's perspective, even if you don't agree with it, to let that person have their space. So you were 2 years as president. That's a really hard job. It doesn't appear to be, but it is. You have to be on the phone all day long, and I so appreciate all you did these last 2 years. And I neglected to mention last time that how honored I was to be up here just with you guys and with this administration. The folks in the back of the room who are always here at every meeting, Stephanie, Nicole, Dan, Keith, and Chris Stanley's missing, Rebecca, Mary, and Mary Ann. All of these people are so wonderful, such great folks, always wanting to help out and work for the good of the all. And so I want to honor you, and also Ahmed and Lisa and David. We worked really well together, and I really treasure our friendship. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think I'm going to look at anyone because I might get emotional, but Joe, you were a terrific board president. We could all learn from your civility. When things got heated at the meetings, and they often did because this was a tumultuous 2 years, you listened to every side and you listened to every issue. You even met with people who disagreed with you, who said cross words about you, and who said terrible things about our board. But you always reminded us that it was about the kids. You said it's always about the kids. We often went off on tangents, but you always brought us back where we needed to be, and that was doing right was for the kids and the students. You kept us in check, even when some of us got snarky. You are brilliant, you're humble, you're dignified. I am lucky to call you a colleague and a friend. You never hesitated to speak your mind. And you always did what was right, but you were always dignified about that. And I would like to learn from that. Grosse Point's losing a great leader and president tonight, and I thank you for your service. Okay, I gotta get this together. Okay, Chris Lee, I'm gonna miss you so much. You always gave us a different perspective, and you managed to use humor and make light of things when we needed it. Your institutional knowledge was important, and I don't think anyone knows more about GPPS than you. You gave 60 years plus. I started to go back to when maybe you started in Grosse Pointe. Your knowledge as a doctor and surgeon was also invaluable, and your information about healthcare was also very, very important over the years. Your stories in and out of school board were the very best. No one has a bigger heart than you, and I know you put your heart and soul into everything you did and what you thought was best for our community. Whether it was the bond or rallying all of us to support John Dean as our superintendent, you were the most loyal person to a cause you believed in, and I know that you always did what you thought was right for the students of our district. Having raised a teacher yourself, you always reminded us how important our teachers are in the community. Thank you for your fierce loyalty to me and for your friendship and for your dedication to Grosse Pointe Public School System.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, that makes me feel good.
You were the best mentor I could ever have. You taught me everything I knew about school board. You taught me how to win a campaign. You taught me how important it was to stand up for what I believe in, to vote my conscience, even if it's not the most popular stance. You were always kind and always tough, but never afraid to stand up for what was right and what was best for our students. You always looked at both sides. You really considered everyone's side and the merits of it. You are the consummate critical thinker because no one considers every side of an argument like you do. You are the gold standard when it comes to school board members. The district's lucky to have you, and I'm fortunate to have you as a colleague and dear friend. School board gave me a lifelong sister that I will always cherish. Thank you for your 8 years of service. You made this board a better institution, and I thank you for always putting the students first. I think I'll miss you most of all. The three of you are the best of the best and some of the best people I know, and it's been a privilege to work with you.
Trustee Pappas.
I'll keep it quick. I want to thank all of the board members and to the three that are leaving us after tonight. Enjoy your retirement, first of all. You got your Monday nights back. It's hard to put into words. It takes a lot to run for office. It sure takes a lot. What you see up here is, you know, this much out of what actually occurs being on the Board of Education. So anybody that you see sitting on this stage has really offered a lot of their time and their energy behind the scenes that you don't see. And it doesn't matter if we always agree or we disagree. These people have given selflessly of their time, to serve the community, to serve the kids. And we've tried to make some really great decisions. We've worked, and I do believe that everybody sitting on the stage does take the kids into account first and foremost. And I think that's really important, whether we agree or disagree on issues. I do believe that everybody here is making decisions based on helping our students and helping our staff. So to the 3 outgoing trustees, I'd like to thank you for your service. It's a lot of time, and I think Dr. Lee said it, our families pick up the slack, for our time and service on the board and our children, and so there's a lot going on behind the scenes that people really don't get until I couldn't imagine until I got elected to this position how much of my time would be taken on this. And everyone sitting up here donates their little, it's not much, small stipend, but they donate it back to the district in some manner. So we're all trying to help our district. We want what's best for our kids. And I think if this board has the biggest accomplishment in my mind, my opinion, it's the fact that this board, ahead of the curve during a global pandemic where there was conflicting information all the time, ahead of the curve. History, has been kind to our decision, and I think will continue to be so, but we got our kids back into school at a time when it was not always the most popular. We took a lot of heat for it, every one of us, and I think the grace and the professionalism and dignity that these people exhibited during a time where, and I because I'm just kind of, I tuned in some other board meetings and they were just ugly. I mean, between board members, ugly. And I think, to handle what we've had to handle during this pandemic, it was a very difficult time. Thank you. I think getting those kids back to school was just an amazing accomplishment, and I know behind the scenes what we were dealing with. You dealt with it gracefully and intelligently, and you listened to everybody. I mean, there were multiple different people, contacting us, and so the amount of time you gave, the stress you went through, that we've all gone through, it has worn on all of us, and I think during those decision-making, there was no right decision at the time, and we all felt the weight of the decision-making process. It wasn't something that any one of you or us, and I don't want to turn away from Trustee Brumbaugh. We took it very seriously. It was a heavy weight to carry. It was a heavy decision to make, and I think we handled it well. And that's a credit to the people that are sitting up at this table. So thank you for conducting yourselves through that process as gracefully as you did. I wish you all the best in the future. Hope to see you around the community. And I want to wish everybody, our staff, students, community members, board members, a wonderful holiday season. Hopefully everybody gets a little time to rest and relax and recharge with our families and friends, and health and good wishes, and we'll be back and see you in the new year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Brumbaugh.
A strong and healthy democracy depends on public service, and public service that's not glamorous or profitable. And I would like to thank the 3 of you in particular for the many difficult decisions that you've had to make over many years, and the hard work that's gone into the service that you've rendered onto our community, our staff, and our kids. Personally, I've benefited greatly from our conversations in your council during the start of my service in the board, and for Margaret and Chris, going back several years before then, when I think I was one of the people in the audience making your Monday nights interesting. And I think that, like Chris said when we were talking about one of the construction projects earlier, it's one of those things where you go in thinking that you have all of the facts and all of the answers and you know how everything's laid out, but there are so many things to learn here. And bringing an open mind and listening to each other, listening to the experts has been how this board has made its best decisions. So I know that Trustee Ismail said it literally about the door always being open here, but figuratively as well. The door is always open. You know, we will continue to serve as a strong board if we continue to listen to the people who have served so well in the past. You have your finger on the pulse of the community. You have an important institutional memory that will be impossible to replace, and your experience in council will always be welcome here. So please show up for your 3 minutes or reach out, phone call, email, coffee, anytime you'd like. Thank you so much for everything you've done for our kids in our schools and our community.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being you to our board of trustees, Dr. Lee, Mrs. Words, and President Hurd. It's been an honor to be able to work with you. I thought I knew what work was did before I was signing up to that role, but now I have a greater understanding as far as just the time, the commitment, the patience that's needed, and just how you have to work on behalf of everyone in the community. So I graciously thank you for your time. Thank you for working with us and even partnering with us to make sure that all of our runners members of the school system is served properly. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Same here.
Happy holidays, everyone. Be safe this break. Relax. Please unplug.
All right. I want to start off by first saying how honored I've been by being in this seat. And when I came for the interview, I met Colleen, and you know, I think it was like 16, 17 people, and when the existing board said, "It's you," I like, really? But I said, okay, so maybe I'm supposed to really be here. And my whole objective has been to serve. And Dr. Lee told me the very first night that I began, he said, buckle up. And the pandemic came right after that. And at that time, we weren't dealing with necessarily a lot of facts because a lot of stuff was unknown. But one thing I did know was that we were serving a caring community, we were serving a bright community, and that sometimes caring, bright people have differing ideas, and that's okay. And throughout this whole thing, including particularly since becoming president of the board, I've been able to talk to people who were bright and caring, who had different ideals, but I think we did a really good job of making it civil conversations so that people would be able to look at our board meetings and maybe compare them to others and say that at the end of the day, we really, even though we may have differing ideas, we make it more about the kids than ourselves. And Margaret has been very key for that to me. She's been a listening ear. I've bothered her, every day? You know, one day I didn't call her. She was like, where's my daily phone call? So the guidance there has been fantastic. Dr. Lee, in terms of being selfless, I mean, you have every reason in the world to think a lot of yourself, and you don't. Our kids are learning from that. A lot of the times the degrees and all those things really don't matter as much as how we comport ourselves on a daily basis. And you're the tops at that. Colleen, you and your husband are, she just makes you feel good by the sincere way that she treats you. I mean, she's either in for you and she'll tell you, or she's not in for you and she'll tell you. And honesty is something actually to be valued. Definitely appreciate it, and just love the impact that I know you're going to have on this new board, as well as Mr. Ismail and Ms. Pappas. Because, again, no problem with disagreeing. Just the one thing that I think I'm sorry, let me continue. I'm going to do this real quick, guys. I know we're heading to the door. Trustee Brumbaugh, very bright young man, and really adds a lot in terms of getting to the specifics of decisions and saying, okay, but this is the logic behind what we're doing, the why. That's invaluable to the community, in my opinion. It really is. And Ms. Pappas, the fire. Don't ever lose that fire. And we may disagree on some things, but one thing we don't disagree on is that honesty is a good thing. And also standing up for what you believe is a good thing. And as long as you have that, you'll continue to be a conscience for this board. And sometimes there may be some pushback from other members, but that's okay too. I mean, you don't have to fall out because we disagree. And I think we've done a really good job of that. So I appreciate that. Dr. Dean, well, go to Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, Dr. Bishop, you know, this young man, brilliant, and a bright future as far as I'm concerned. Most of that, a lot of that is based upon the way that he treats people. And look at the way that he's received by the community and how people interact with him. It's because of how he treats them. When you have a person who is getting a call from the last president of the United States and would almost seem to be the opposite of everything that he stands for, but she's speaking passionately about what he's done for her daughter, I think that's the key. How do we treat our children? Because that breaks down all that political stuff. When you start dealing with, how do you deal with my kids? And Dr. Bishop dealt with her kids, and she said, listen, I transferred my kid out of the school system after she was no longer with him. I highly recommend him. And then, Dr. Dean, I know I've bothered him at times, but but he always has answers. He always has a plan, and he's always willing to listen. And people think that a lot of the times we've been yes people for him. We really haven't. In fact, we've given him some pretty rough goals at times. But we do it in a way so that when we come before the public, then the public gets final decisions as opposed to all the clamoring that you get in some spaces. And I think that's a good thing. And I'm looking forward to what's going to happen with the new board. I'm a fan of the new board. Why am I a fan of the new board? Because I would be a fool to not be a fan of the board who handles my child. My child is in the school system. My other two have gone through the school system and are successful because of the school system. Grosse Pointe has a lot to hold their heads up about. And a lot of the times we talk about the things that we disagree about and how maybe we weren't as good as we've been. Well, I don't know that history, but I know this history, that my children have benefited, my family has benefited greatly from being here, and that those same values that I grew up with, they still work. They're timeless. Honesty, transparency, listening, those things, and I'm looking forward to seeing that work with the new board and for the successes that are going to come. In that when people speak about Grosse Pointe, they're going to speak very highly, as they always have, because we operate on a very high level. So with that, I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday, and as Dr. Dean said, get some rest and come back, and let's continue working on behalf of our children. They deserve that. So thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.